The evidence for the resurrection. Did Jesus really rise from the dead? Let's look at the narrative and the evidence. Now, the Jews and Romans were not naive to the fact that in Jesus' ministry, he preached of his own resurrection after 3 days. While some of his followers likely did not interpret it correctly, since they expected a conquering Messiah and not a suffering one, they still made sure that the burial site was secured as a precaution. First of all, they put a 1.5 to 2-ton stone in front of the tomb, which equates to 3,000 to 4,000 pounds. Secondly, they placed Roman soldiers to guard the tomb, in case any of Jesus' followers tried to steal the body. In that day, Roman soldiers who failed their tasks were often buried alive in a fire that was started with their own garments, so conspiring with the disciples to steal the body was not an option. The fear of that type of punishment was plenty of incentive to ensure they accomplished their task. Unlikely as it may seem, 3 days later the tomb was rolled away, and the guards who witnessed the supernatural encounter fled the scene for fear of their lives. They never returned because they knew what fate awaited them from their authorities. Upon his disciples visiting the scene, Jesus' clothes were folded neatly. What many do not take into consideration is the fact that his disciples were completely demoralized by his death and nearly lost all hope before seeing him in his resurrected form. They were ready to return to their normal lives, as if the show was over. Even after witnessing miracle after miracle, their humanity tempted them to doubt Jesus' deity. Not only did Jesus appear to his disciples in his resurrected form, but he also appeared to over 500 eyewitnesses. Jesus even appeared to 2 women before any other disciples, which is recorded in the New Testament, at a time where the testimony of women was not even valid, which further proves the authenticity of the written account. Upon seeing Jesus in his resurrected form, the disciples' ministry grew exponentially as they were willing to risk anything and sacrifice their lives to spread the gospel. Seeing as the whole faith was dependent upon this crucial event, the resurrection, it would make no sense why 11 out of the 12 disciples died horrific deaths for the name of Jesus, unless they actually saw him in his resurrected form. These deaths included stoning, burning at the stake, beheading, and crucifixion. These are some of the cruelest deaths of all time. There's no reason why any rational human being would go through that type of death unless they were sure of the reason. It's different for the disciples because they were with Jesus for his entire ministry. There would have been no reason to die for it if it was all a lie. What makes matters even more interesting is that the Jews and Romans had no way of stopping the spread of this faith since they could not locate the body anywhere. Not only were they unable to locate the body, but Jesus' disciples and other Christian converts were going around performing miraculous signs left and right in the name of Jesus. To further the argument, I'm going to share the 4 E's that Lee Strobel uses to simplify the evidence for the resurrection. 1. Execution. Christ obviously couldn't have risen from the dead unless he was first killed. There's no dispute from historical scholars, both Christian and non-Christian, that Jesus was crucified and died as a result. Several authors who wrote about this, including non-Christians outside of the Bible, include Josephus, Tacitus, Lucian, Mar Bar Serapion, Suetonius, Phlegon, Celsius, Phlegon, Pliny the Younger, and even the Jewish Talmud. Normally, we're lucky to have just 2 sources to confirm a historical event, let alone 10 or more outside of the Bible. It would be laughable for any scholar to deny Jesus' death by crucifixion with this many accounts. 2. Early. Early accounts point to the fact that Jesus rose from the dead. Usually, legends take hundreds of years to form and misconstrue factual evidence, but the disciples of Jesus formed a creed just a few years after seeing Christ in his resurrected form. The creed included the following points: Jesus died, rose again, appeared to Peter first, then the other disciples. He appeared to over 500 eyewitnesses. He appeared to his brother James. Lastly, he appeared to a skeptic, Paul. Corinthians is the letter which confirms this creed and was written around 54 AD, which was during the life of the apostles. The Gospels were written just several years later, also during the life of the apostles. Most ancient literature, which we hold to be true, was written hundreds or even thousands of years after the life of the individual. The biography of Alexander the Great was written 400 years after his life and considered accurate by most sources. To make the argument even greater, Paul was one of the top Christian persecutors before Christ appeared to him. There was no incentive for him to change paths and risk his life. In order to investigate matters further, he consulted with Peter and James in Jerusalem, along with other eyewitnesses of the risen Christ. The early Christians would have been happy to point out the fallacies of the claim, had it been false. But given the number of eyewitnesses, the miracles that were being performed in the name of Jesus, and the undeniable life changes that were taking place around them, there was no room for any doubt. 3. Empty. The tomb was found empty on all accounts. Even opponents of the faith acknowledged the empty tomb. The Jewish authorities conspired to say that the body was stolen and would have done anything to recoup it, but there was no sign of a body anywhere. This made matters very difficult for them. It was an embarrassing fact, considering that they placed guards to watch over the tomb in the event that the disciples would try to steal the body, or that the claim of the resurrection was actually true. 4. Eyewitnesses. There were at least 515 eyewitnesses and 9 sources written outside of the Bible that confirm that the risen Christ appeared to people. One of the top arguments used by skeptics to explain this away is mass hallucinations, but hallucinations are by nature an individual, exclusive experience, so the chances of over 500 people hallucinating over this event are even less probable than the resurrection itself. How is it possible for a man who only had 3 years of ministry after working in a carpentry shop for 30 years to change the world as we know it and accumulate billions of followers with a faith spreading faster than anyone could stop? Since most of the intricate details of Jesus' life and ministry we know about are recorded in the Bible, it's also important to validate its accuracy. Watch the Evidence for the Bible video to learn more.